The cameras were rolling. The audience was silent. And then Dr. Phil did something he had never done in over 2 decades on television. He stopped mid-sentence, removed his glasses, and wept. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. It was raw, human, and completely real. The letter in the young man's hands trembled as he read words he had written 15 years too late. His father sat 3 feet away, frozen, unable to move or speak. And in that moment, everyone in the studio, the crew, the audience, even the hardened producers in the control room felt the weight of 15 years of silence shatter into a million pieces. This is the story of the apology that broke Dr. Phil. If you think you know how this ends, you don't. Subscribe now and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 3 months before that moment, a letter arrived at the Dr. Phil show offices. It wasn't like the thousands they received every week. This one was different. It was handwritten, barely legible in places, smudged with what looked like tear stains. The envelope had been opened and resealed multiple times, as if the sender couldn't decide whether to send it. Inside, a 28-year-old man named Michael wrote about a mistake that had defined his entire adult life. 15 years earlier, at age 13, he had lied. Not a small lie, not the kind kids tell to avoid punishment, a lie so devastating that it destroyed his relationship with his father, tore his family apart, and left scars so deep that even time couldn't heal them. Michael's father, Robert, had been accused of something terrible based on Michael's testimony. Child Protective Services had gotten involved, police had investigated, Robert had lost custody, lost his job, lost his reputation. The case never went to trial. There wasn't enough evidence, but the damage was done. Robert's name was ruined. His son wouldn't speak to him. His ex-wife had moved across the country with Michael, and for 15 years, father and son had lived as strangers. But now, at 28, Michael wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to admit that he had lied because he was angry, because he wanted to hurt his father the way he felt hurt during the divorce, because he was a child who didn't understand the consequences of his words. And he wanted to do it on national television, because private apologies weren't enough for public destruction. The Dr. Phil team didn't take the case lightly. They spent weeks verifying the story, speaking to family members, reviewing old court documents. They contacted Robert, who initially refused to participate. "Why would I put myself through that again?" he told producers. "My son destroyed my life. I've spent 15 years rebuilding. Why would I let him tear it down again on TV?" But there was something in Michael's letter that haunted Robert. A single line. "I know you have every right to hate me, but before you die, before I die, I need you to know the truth. Not for me, for you." Robert agreed to come to the studio on one condition. He wouldn't make any promises about forgiveness. He would hear Michael out, but that was all. No guarantees, no Hollywood ending. The day of the taping, the studio felt different. The staff could sense it. Dr. Phil had read both letters, Michael's original one and Robert's response, multiple times. He had made notes, crossed them out, made new ones. He had called his own son the night before just to hear his voice. Some stories, Dr. Phil told his producers in the pre-show meeting, aren't about entertainment. They're about witnessing something sacred. Today might be one of those days. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Michael walked onto the stage first. He was tall, thin, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. He wore a simple gray shirt and jeans, and in his hands he clutched a folded piece of paper, the letter he had written to his father, the one he planned to read on air. Dr. Phil greeted him with characteristic warmth, but there was something gentler in his approach today. He asked Michael to sit, to breathe, to take his time. The audience watched in silence as this young man, trembling, tried to explain why he had asked to be here. "I destroyed my father," Michael said simply, "and I need to fix it before it's too late." Dr. Phil leaned forward. You understand that your father may not be ready to hear this. He may not forgive you. Are you prepared for that?" Michael nodded. "I'm not here for me. I'm here because he deserves the truth. Even if he never speaks to me again, he deserves to know that what I said wasn't true, that he didn't do what I said he did, that he's not the monster I made him out to be." That's when Dr. Phil made the call. "Bring Robert out." The control room hesitated. This wasn't in the show format. Typically, they would have built more suspense, done a commercial break, teased what was coming. But Dr. Phil's instinct told him differently. This wasn't a moment to manipulate. This was a moment to honor. Robert walked onto the stage, and the air changed. He was older than Michael remembered, grayer, smaller somehow, as if the years had physically diminished him. He wore a button-down shirt that looked like it had been ironed multiple times, dress pants, shoes polished to a shine. He had dressed with the dignity of a man who had lost everything, but refused to lose his self-respect. Father and son locked eyes for the first time in 15 years. Neither moved, neither spoke. The audience collectively held its breath. Dr. Phil stood. "Robert, Michael has something he needs to say to you. You don't have to respond, you don't have to do anything, but listen. Can you do that?" Robert's jaw tightened. He nodded once, sharp and controlled, then sat in the chair positioned across from his son. 3 feet of space. 15 years of silence. Michael unfolded the letter. His hands shook so violently that the paper rattled audibly in the microphone. He tried to speak, choked, tried again. "Dad?"
You called every week. You sent letters I never opened. You tried, and I punished you for it. I punished you for something you didn't do, because I couldn't punish you for the one thing that actually hurt, which was that our family fell apart, and I didn't know how to handle it." Robert's face was stoned, but his eyes betrayed him. They were wet, glistening under the studio lights, though no tears fell. Michael continued. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I'm just asking you to know that everything I said was a lie. You didn't hurt me. You didn't do what I said you did. You were a good father, and I destroyed you because I was angry and stupid and didn't understand what I was doing. And I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." The letter ended. Michael folded it carefully, as if it were something sacred, and placed it on the small table between them. An offering, a confession, a plea. For a long moment, no one moved. The camera stayed on Robert's face, waiting. The audience barely breathed. Dr. Phil remained standing, silent, giving space to whatever was about to happen. Robert opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His voice, when it finally came, was broken, barely above a whisper. "Do you have any idea," he said, "what it's like to have your child look at you like you're a monster? To have everyone you know believe you're capable of hurting your own son?" Michael's face crumpled. "I'm sorry." "Let me finish." Robert's voice gained strength, though it trembled with emotion. "I lost everything. My job, my friends, my reputation. People I'd known my whole life crossed the street to avoid me. My own mother didn't believe me. And you know what the worst part was? The absolute worst part?" He leaned forward, and for the first time his composure cracked. "I still loved you. Even when you lied, even when you destroyed me. I still loved you, and I hated myself for it. Because what kind of man loves someone who's trying to ruin him?" But what happened next is something no one in the room or watching at home saw coming. Dr. Phil, who had been standing silently to the side, suddenly moved. He stepped between the cameras, breaking the fourth wall entirely, and walked directly to Robert. He knelt beside his chair, something he almost never did, and placed a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Robert," Dr. Phil said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "you don't have to do this. You don't have to forgive him. You don't have to give him anything. You've already given enough." Robert looked at Dr. Phil, then back at his son. Something in his face shifted. The armor he had worn for 15 years, the protective shell that had kept him alive through the worst years of his life, began to crack. "But he's my son," Robert said, and his voice broke completely. "He's my son, and I lost 15 years with him, and I don't want to lose any more." That's when it happened. Robert stood, crossed the 3 feet of space that had separated them, and pulled Michael into his arms. Michael collapsed into his father's chest, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. Robert held him, one hand on the back of his head, the other around his shoulders, and finally let himself cry. The studio erupted. The audience stood as one, tears streaming down faces, applause breaking through the emotional dam. Production assistants in the wings openly wept. Even the camera operators, veterans who had seen thousands of emotional moments, wiped their eyes. And Dr. Phil, standing a few feet away, removed his glasses and pressed his fingers to his eyes. His shoulders shook. His face, usually so controlled and professional, crumbled into raw emotion. For the first time in over 20 years of television, Dr. Phil McGraw broke down on camera. He tried to compose himself, failed, tried again. Finally, he looked directly into the camera, his voice thick and unsteady. "Stop the cameras," he said. The director's voice crackled in the earpieces. "Dr. Phil, we're live. I said stop the cameras." The red lights on the cameras blinked off. The studio, still filled with emotion, went into a kind of sacred pause. What happened next would never be broadcast, would never be seen by viewers at home. It was private, witnessed only by those in the room. Dr. Phil walked to Michael and Robert, still embracing, and placed his hands on both their shoulders. He said something quiet, something meant only for them. Then he stepped back, nodded to his producers, and said, "We're done for today. Subscribe and share this story. Make sure it's never forgotten." Later, after the studio had cleared, after Michael and Robert had been guided to a private room where a therapist waited to help them process the enormity of what had just happened, Dr. Phil sat alone on the stage. The lights were off except for a single overhead spot. He held the letter Michael had brought,
the one he had read to his father, and read it again. His executive producer found him there 20 minutes later. "You okay, Phil?" Dr. Phil folded the letter carefully and handed it back. "Make sure Michael gets this back and get me Robert's contact information. I want to follow up personally, not through the show. This isn't content. This is someone's life." The producer nodded. "I've never seen you like that." "I've been doing this for 23 years, Dr. Phil said quietly. I've seen thousands of families, thousands of stories, but every once in a while, you witness something that reminds you why you do this work. Today was one of those days." He stood, straightened his tie, and looked at the empty chairs where Michael and Robert had sat. That young man carried a lie for 15 years. It poisoned him, poisoned his father, poisoned everything they could have been. And today, he found the courage to tell the truth, even knowing he might lose everything. That's not easy. That's not common. He paused. That's what redemption looks like. 3 months after the taping, Dr. Phil's office received an envelope. Inside was a photo. Michael and Robert at a baseball game, arms around each other's shoulders, both smiling. On the back, and Robert's handwriting, "We're going to be okay. Thank you for giving us the space to find each other again." The photo sits on Dr. Phil's desk now, a reminder that some stories don't need perfect endings. They just need honest beginnings. The letter Michael read that day has never been published. It remains private, sacred, a confession meant for one man's ears. But its impact rippled far beyond that studio, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it costs you everything. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is forgive, even when you have every right not to. That day, in that studio, 2 men found their way back to each other, and Dr. Phil, the man who had spent decades helping others heal, was reminded why he does his work. Some moments transcend television.